Okay, thanks for joining me here on the podcast, the Rick in Japan podcast. This story is the Filth Brothers journey story. Okay, uh, I got to Colorado in 1978. I quit my job at the Detroit Edison Company and said goodbye to the family and moved to Colorado, Snowmass, Colorado, where John was living. He invited every one of his friends, anyone and everyone, to come and live with him in Colorado. And I did because I had nothing else to do. It seemed like a good chance to get away because I was not into the life of becoming a company worker and working and stuff like that. So I had a choice. John gave me an option. I took that option. I moved to Colorado. And when I got there, John said one of the first things John required or requested that I do was buy a cassette player. One of those, this was 1978, and there were no CDs or DVDs. There were those big cassette things because John had a cassette of the show, The Last Waltz, with the band. Okay, excellent, excellent show, and I've seen it literally dozens of times. I listen to the music often. Anyhow, I really like it. But John wanted to have the Last Waltz party at his place. John was a party guy, and he needed but we didn't have a cassette player. So I went to Glenwood Springs from Snowmass, hitchhiked Glenwood Springs to Glenwood Springs, from Snowmass. And it was a beautiful day. I remember it was nice blue skies. I didn't go to Grand Junction. I'm thinking Grand Junction, but that's way too far. There must have been a place to buy it in Glenwood Springs. So I hitchhiked there. That took a long time. Not a lot of people driving up and down along the Roaring Fork River. But I did get to Glenwood Springs, made my purchase, and this thing is huge and heavy. And I can't remember about speakers. I don't think I had to buy speakers. But I get back from Colorado Springs and hitchhike back to Snowmass. And then they set up this cassette player. And we had the Last Waltz party with that. The point of this information is I used my credit card to buy this cassette player, okay? Okay, now that's the premise of this Filth Brothers journey to Key West, Florida. John said, you want to leave Colorado in the spring. Why? Because the snow is melting. Everything turns to mud. And he was absolutely correct. It's just a really muddy place. So we had a Filth Brothers truck. John had a 1965 or 66 Ford pickup truck. It was black. It was a 3-speed transmission with a shifter on the column. And I was driving a 3-speed transmission or a 4-speed transmission all my life, all my 5-6 years driving cars. And that was no problem. And John had a cabin attached over the cargo bed so he could sleep on it. And there was a door in the back. There were windows on the side and a door on the back. And on that door, on the outside, John put a poster up there, a board that said, Filth Brothers. That was us, the Filth Brothers. Another thing about the truck was that before we set out on this journey, we needed a car inspection. So we go to the garage, and I forgot the guy's name, the owner, young guy. A lot of the people there in Colorado were young people just starting out, trying to make business, and live in this beautiful place where we lived up there in the Rocky Mountains. And I didn't mention about the city names, the town names. Here you're living really in the mountains, okay? When you know the names of the towns are like Rifle, that's a town name. Eagle, Silt, Basalt, Gypsum, Leadville, né? Amongst Aspen and Snowmass, and a lot of other names up there. Né? So this guy at the gas station, John goes there and says, we need the car inspected. And the guy inspects the car, and I think we even bought a couple new tires, perhaps with my credit card. So we get inspected, but the guy says, the brake lights don't work. And John said, well, can't you jury rig something? Which the guy did. He said, no, we can't do that. And John said, sure you can. And John offered him some incentive, okay? And that paid off. So he put a toggle switch under the dashboard on the driver's side where if you stepped on the brakes, you open the switch, put on the switch, and the lights would come on in the back, the brake lights. Then when you start up again, the toggle switch, you put it off. So the brake lights would go off. And that's how we drove on this journey. And the journey was from Colorado to, let's see, where's my notes here? From Colorado to Detroit, Snowmass, Colorado, Detroit, which is 2,352 kilometers or 1,462 miles. And it says 27 and a half hours. Then we went from Detroit to New York City, and that distance is 988 kilometers or 614 miles, 9.5 hours. That's straight driving. Then from New York City, we went to Key West, Florida, 2,311 kilometers, 1,436 miles, and 21.53 hours. Then from Key West, Florida, we went up to Joplin, Missouri. John knew a guy up there. 2,510 kilometers, 1,560 miles, and that's 28 hours. Then from Joplin, back to Snowmass, Colorado. Another 1,435 kilometers, 892 miles. And that would take 13.29 hours of straight driving. Okay? So we stopped in each place and did different things there. The first place we went was from Colorado to Detroit. And I remember driving through Gary, Indiana. That place smelled bad. It smelled like Detroit, the Ford Motor Company. They have the same distinct, disgusting smell about them. There was another place down south, too. It was the same way. But that's okay. That's not a problem. So in Detroit, we're back in Detroit. I stay in my mom's house and my mother and father's house, much to their chagrin, I guess, because I just left a couple, not a half year earlier. And John went back to his parents' house. And I got the truck, okay? And John had a car at his mother's house, I guess. But I'm get the truck. And I asked the guy across the street, Gary, Margie and Gary was a couple across the street. They had two sons that my mother used to take care of. So they called my mother Mama Jean. Okay, so I asked this guy, Gary, to look at the truck. And he cleaned the carburetor for us. He was a kind of a mechanic. He did stuff like that. He cleaned the carburetor for us and did some other stuff there in back in Detroit. Might have met a couple friends, this, that, and the other. And then from there, okay, about 3 days we were there. And then we moved on to New York City. Okay? And then in New York City, there were these two guys who were in Colorado. And I can't remember if they were brothers or just cousins or something. They lived in New York City. And their mother was their family, the really rich people. So we're up in upper New York somewhere. And John's expecting us to stay there. But the mother said, no way. Jose, we pull up in this 65 Dodge truck with the, or Chevy, Dodge truck with the camper on the back. And she said, no way you guys are staying here. But John was looking to do some business with these guys. It didn't work out. So he parked right in front of their gorgeous house with this 65 pickup. From there, and that one night we went to New York City. And we were there at 3 in the morning. And of course, John's on the hunt. And I'm just hanging out, seeing what's happening. And we were drinking a beer up in this place. Nothing happening. But that's what we did. So then the next day we shoved off and headed down to Key West, Florida. Okay? On the way, we stopped somewhere in South Carolina somewhere. And John, we got firecrackers. Got firecrackers somewhere. And John's becoming more and more antsy, I guess. And he lit off these firecrackers in his neighborhood, all these fireworks. I thought, what the heck? But nothing happened. Nothing happened. There was no repercussions. We moved on. It was late at night, but we moved on. We slept here and there, pulled the truck over on the highway in the parking areas and slept. Then when we got into Florida, we went to the Everglades. First, we went to Jacksonville. John was hoping. Didn't go to Miami, which would be a ridiculous thing to do in that truck, I guess. But then went to the Everglades. And John wanted to take pictures in the Everglades. He was a photographer, John, always has been. When we lived in Detroit, we were going to high school. In high school, he got a job at Crane's Photo Studio, taking pictures. And that was one of his fortes. Yep, photographer. So when we get down to Everglades, he wants to take a picture of the sunset. We're in the Everglades. And there's nothing but mosquitoes. Luckily, no alligators, I guess. But mosquitoes everywhere. And he's setting up this camera. And that was quite a adventure, dodging thousands of mosquitoes. From there, we went down. But when we're still in somewhere, Upper Florida or North Carolina somewhere, we needed money. Okay? Here's the credit card story. I go to the bank to get out a couple $100. And the woman teller says, this is well overdrawn. I said, yeah, but I'll take care of it later because we're on a trip right now. She says, no, I can't give you any money. I said, well, you can't give me any money. I said, we need money. She said, I can't give you the money. She said, as a matter of fact, give me your credit card. We got to take it. We got to revoke it or something like that. I said, no, we can't do that. That's all. She said, no, you got to give it back. So I had to make a decision. And it was the wrong one. I gave the card back to the lady at the bank and went back to the car. John was really disappointed because our funds were low and that credit card was keeping us, alive, basically. But I wasn't used to that kind of lifestyle, see? And so John knew everything would work out in the end. It always did with John. But the credit card was gone. So John had to call his mother to have money wired. When we got down to Key West, have you ever been to Key West? Beautiful place. Beautiful place. We parked the Filth Brothers truck in some little parking lot. And the next morning we set up, John was playing the guitar. He bought his guitar. He was playing his guitar with the case open, hoping people would give donations to us. I was trying to sing or get people to come over and listen to John play music. It was pretty corny, but it was something to do. But we had no money, and we were really hungry, and there's still thousands of mosquitoes here. But nice weather. The beaches were beautiful. So after a couple of days, the wire transfer came. We got the do-re-mi, as my father would say. We head out on the road again. We were Sloppy Joe's. I told you that, in front of Sloppy Joe's. And we headed back up over to Joplin, Missouri. And in Joplin, Missouri. John had a buddy over there. He was a farmer. He had this big cow farm, and a regular farm. He had cows on it. And I'm telling you, these cows are big animals. Okay, they're docile. They're very friendly, but they're huge. And I'll tell you the truth, I was afraid of the cows. I mean, it's embarrassing to say, but that's the truth. And there's John. He's driving this guy's tractor around. What a guy. And at night, we had dinner. We stayed there one night, and I was in a bad mood, as I often was. And I remember saying nothing at the dinner. And I didn't think I said thank you. I was such a child. Can I? But that was a long time ago when I had hair. Anyway, so we stayed there a night or two, and John, I think John had some kind of a arrangement with this guy. They were setting up a deal of some sorts, and whether it worked out or not, I don't know. But we left there. Then we drive back to Snowmass. Okay, and when we got back there, we started. It was spring. The spring was ending. It was back to work, back in the restaurants, back in the as a Gant man, doing other kind of jobs. And this was a preparation for getting our trip back to over to Hawaii, and that will probably be the next story I'm going to podcast about. Okay, so this one is the end, the Filth Brothers journey. Thank you very much.